we've got 3 representatives from the state of Washington to tell you a little bit about their experiences from 2014, maybe even 2013 and 14. And they're willing to share their story, so I'm not going to say any more and just let them get going on this. There's no slides. This is a discussion session, so feel free to join in with your stories if you can also contribute. Curtis, Andy, and Denver will be right back.
Maybe I'll start out by saying if you think everything's going great, obviously you don't know what in the hell's going on. So I'll start a year ago, end of July, beginning of August. And some of you heard part of this yesterday. We got some nice rain, really nice rain. I was like, hot damn, this is going to be nice seeding. I feel like an irrigated farmer. I'm bringing up mud behind the drills. I jumped on and I just went to planting canola. It came up beautifully. I mean, nowhere in 30 years had I had anything like that. Everything came. God, I was Fat City, kind of towards the title. The neighbor's like, oh, God, that's beautiful. That's the nicest stand you've ever had. I said, yeah, I really feel lucky. Well, last winter happened. Well, last fall, really. It had beautiful conditions, had all the fertility it needed, had a nice open fall, and it grew and grew and grew. Well, stem elongation happened. We got cold in December. Kind of kicked its butt real bad. After the conference last year, Kierkegaard and Phil Thomas were up at my place, looked at it. It was still alive. Well, it got nice and warm, relatively speaking, broke dormancy, started to bolt again. That next freeze pretty much finished it. So what looked beautiful was one field when winter was finally over, obviously completely gone. The next one, crowns were still good, and I've told anybody that talked about it or the span of time that if the crown's still white, it'll snap out of it. Spring stayed cold, pretty ugly. Well, the next field that I should have taken out, that I eventually took out way too late. Yeah, spring wheat. I'm not going to go back on a broadleaf crop with another broadleaf crop. About 20 bushel. The one that I did take out a little bit earlier is about 22 bushel wheat. Another field at home that I left, thought was going to be okay. It never snapped out of it either. Took 2 tandem loads off of 180 acres. Well, okay, so at least I got one good one left at Washtuckna. And it was buried in the back where I was trying to clean up a rye problem, and I had seed crops in front of it that weren't ready yet. So I went elsewhere for 10 days and cut, came back. This crop several of us looked at, we thought it'd make 1,400 pounds maybe. Yeah, nothing great, but at least something to have. I guess it was my first experiment in cover crop. By the time I got to it, and as many of you realize, we had a lot of grasshoppers this year. My farm at Washtuckna is an island in amongst CRP and pasture. By the time I got to it, there wasn't even a strip of green left on the stalks. The grasshoppers had moved in so thick. That was less than 1 tandem load off of 347 acres. So that was my cover crop experience for the year. And part of that, the neighbors thought everything was great. They didn't know any better than I did, which it was, damn it, hate it when that happens. You don't find yourself often wishing for kind of crappy conditions so that doesn't happen to you, but much better luck in the past. Wheat crops were, and this is just kind of how the year went. Wheat crops were, okay, 60%, 70% of normal. Well, the other thing Curtis did this year was it was so stinking dry. For the first time, I chem fallowed everything. Well, that wasn't necessarily a mistake. And a story I told, one of the bright things though, and I'm kind of half chem fallow or half no-till, part chem fallow, part conventional. I did tell Mike Stubbs yesterday that I did learn something out of this year. The one field that has been the longest chem fallow of anything I have, no-till, was my best moisture by far of anything out there. So it takes a while, but it really does make a difference. Well, we're putting a lot of money into spraying Russian thistles, etc. It seems nothing else will grow, but Russian thistles will grow. And a little China lettuce, there's a tough one of those once in a while. This fall comes along, no moisture. And of course, last year I was in the sweet spot, as you kind of figured out, if I had those kind of conditions to seed. If it was going to rain, it rained on me. Well, averages come from somewhere. This year, the rains were a mile north, the rains were a mile south, they're a mile north again. Not on top of me, so that's the averages part of the thing. We finally got into fall, got rain middle of October, started seeding, skipped the Long Beach ASA meetings, ate my plane tickets because it was too late, but I jumped on the spur and had 2 sets of drills going. Finally got done seeding the day, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the next morning in November, the soil was too stiff to stick a drill in the ground again, but I did get all my winter crop in. My culmination of how bad, well, I can't say that. Thought I was being smart on fuel purchasing side. Watched fuel price drop, start back up again. Bought in a semi-load at $2.76 a gallon, which I thought was pretty nice. The other day, one of my suppliers called and said, "You need any fuel?" Got it for $1.57. That was just a nice culmination to the year. So, thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is just such an exciting topic to talk about, your mistakes, When you get asked to speak on this, you just can't wait to tell everybody how bad it was. But anyway, 2014, the year your neighbor was right. I'm Denver Black, farm up in Mansfield, northern Douglas County. We're in our 4th year of direct seeding. Will be our 4th year of canola as well. We started canola and direct seeding at the same time. And our first go at it was pretty rough. We learned a lot of lessons. We thought we learned all the lessons. And kind of like Curtis here, the previous year, not this year, but the year before with our canola, we had just a glorious stand going into the winter. Just looked phenomenal. Some of it did die. Most of it came out. Looked great, and we thought we just had it made in the shade. And it was a rough year. We had yields below what we expected. We started cutting our canola first, and we thought, this stinking canola, And then we hit our wheat and went, oh, the canola was pretty good, We actually did pretty good on the canola. So, I got a lot of things we could talk about. This was a hard year. Like Curtis mentioned, it seemed like we couldn't grow anything but thistles. The thistles, we just had champion thistles. Had all sorts of fun in chem fallow. But I guess what I really wanted to hit on today, in particular with canola and direct seeding, was something we really didn't anticipate at all. We found out that seeding canola, and I've, to some people's credit, we've had a lot of people mention that perhaps it's best to not put fertility with canola when you're seeding it. But we really didn't know that you could kill your canola entirely when you fertilize at the same time as you seed canola. Now, if we would have been a little more clairvoyant, we could have seen this the previous crop we seeded, because we'd seeded our canola in 13, and we thought we had it corked. It rained right afterwards, and the canola wasn't coming, and so we decided to reseed. So we did, and had a perfect stand as a result of that. But what we found out later from this year is we went out and seeded. Weather was great, moisture was good, and we thought, let's get out and get it done. So we went in, seeded our canola, and I'm a freak for digging. Everybody gives me a hard time. I'm down on my hands and knees about every day digging to look at the canola. Yeah, go ahead.
What time of year is it?
Sorry?
What time of the year?
Are we seeding?
Yes.
Oh, that'd be seeding this summer. We decided to seed, I think it was August, would have been August 20th, this year, 2014. So, like I said, the weather was good. We received some timely rain. I think it was something like 1/10 of an inch. The moisture was good. So we pull in with the drill, seed, and like I say, I'm digging. I like to dig a lot, and everything's coming along well. And I'm digging right up to, I think it was right about the 7 to 10 day mark. I'm seeing cotyledons get ready to pop. We're thinking, this is great. It's coming up even. And thought, I'm not even going to bother. We got busy. I came back. 3 days later, I just knew I'd have a full stand, and it was bare dirt. And we thought, what is going on? We dig. Well, it looked like, some people had said that it can desiccate coming through hot dirt. Is it this? Is it that? I mean, we struggled with this for quite a while and couldn't come to a conclusion. Finally, it dawned on me. I'd remembered being a less than perfect operator with the drill, and I could remember a time or two when maybe I would have accidentally forgot to turn my fertilizer back on when I came out of a headland. And I thought, you don't suppose it could be related to fertility. I thought real hard, and I went into some of I'd taken the maps off from our application, and I found a couple skips on there, and I thought, okay, we'll go take a look. And I went out there where we had no fertilizer, and we had a perfect stand of canola. I mean, and when I say perfect, we've got our population figured out with our seed rate. We should have near 10 plants per linear foot in row, and we had probably 8 to 10 plants per foot. So we had an excellent, and it kept growing. And so that led us to ask a lot of questions, talk to a lot of experts. The short of the story and our conclusion is, in our low rainfall, coarse soils, we're a sandy soil, and high temperatures, having fertilizer near the seed zone in a concentrated band, we're banding the fertilizer 2 inches below the seed, directly below the seed. And we're resealing that. And even though in theory our separation is sound, and we use Agritane to help control the conversion of urea to try and cut down on that anhydrous burn, what we've found is that as that seedling, the roots initially hit that concentrated zone, it's actually the salt content in the fertilizer that is desiccating or drying out, that reverse osmotic that we're not looking for, is drying out that canola. And it just so happens that, the time that seedling root is hitting that concentrated salt band is about the same time your cotyledons are pushing as well. And so, we have the aha moment. Thankfully, it's something you never want to find out that what you did killed your whole crop. But we were really happy we found out in a timely enough manner that we could reseed it. And we did. We seeded a little later than we liked to. September 1st, we reseeded it. We'd seeded, how much was it? About 250 acres. And we decided only to reseed 185 back, and we put wheat onto the other portion of it. And the only reason I mention that is because it doesn't kill the wheat, the fertilizing in the fall. But if it's killing the canola, it's made us ask questions. What is it doing to the wheat? Is it hurting our wheat? And so by extension, that's something we're going to be looking into in the near future. Where we reseeded the canola, obviously we didn't fertilize when we seeded it. And similarly, when we seeded the wheat, the winter wheat, back into that 50 acres where we had seeded canola that had died, we didn't fertilize the wheat at that time either because we'd already fertilized it. And that wheat seemed to look better than the wheat adjacent to it that had fertilizer put down with it as well. So in our, again, coarse, dry soils and hot seeding conditions, it's causing us to ask questions about fertility. The crazy thing about it is we've also moved to a split application in our fertility program. So we were only putting down 25 pounds of N from UN32, about 7 pounds of sulfur from thiosol, and 7 pounds of phosphorus from 1034. So, when we consulted with a lot of experts, they were saying, man, that's mild, even for low moisture, even for your coarse soils. That's a low level of fertility. It didn't seem like, especially with UN32, there'd be a concern. But again, probably our question at the time was, will we burn our seed? And the answer is no. But the salt concentration of that fertilizer in that very concentrated zone combined with the fact that when you deep band that and we have compacted soils, we have that plow pan we're ripping into kind of for the first time now, that really encourages that seedling to travel down that soft soil. It's softer than the surrounding. And so it's kind of like a straight shot into a disaster, unfortunately. Instead of being that fertility we hope it to be, it turned out to be a sudden and instant death. So, but like I say, we went ahead and planted our canola, reseeded it, and it came up really well. And we have a good stand, even considering that it was such a dry year. So that was our biggest catastrophe with canola for the year. But by and large, like I said, we have a good stand coming up after it, so I think we've tackled the problem at least. And our solution going forward will probably be either using a Coulter injector, a couple weeks prior to seeding, and or just top dressing with a stream bar or something like that after we've seeded our canola. So.
Well, I got to appreciate these two guys and how they talk about this stuff. I tend to be pretty tightly wound. Maybe you could tell. I'm pretty mellow, actually, when I'm here compared to in the field. So one of my employees is over here, and she's trying not to grin too much at me. But, yeah, that can be a problem. And I'm kind of like my grandpa, when you're sleeping at night, a nice resting pulse is, 100, 110, you're a pretty easygoing guy, right? So this year was not a good year for easygoing guys like me. In Bickleton, it kind of was one of those ones, no matter what I did, I either screwed it up or some act of God occurred that I know not yet what it was. And needless to say, it didn't go all that well. So we'll start a similar story to Curtis. We went into last winter with a really nice stand of winter canola. We actually were one of the wild, crazy guys that seeded it on June 28th with no fertility, and it went through fall just fine. It didn't bolt. It cabbaged out real nice, and we had envy of the neighbors going into winter. And right about this time a year ago, we had the gentleman from Rubisco Seeds wanted to go take a look at what a cross-slot drill, how it seeds the canola and how the stand looked. And we got up there, and I got to at least appreciate, I like people that shoot straight. Now, I don't have to waste a whole lot of time trying to figure out what it was they're trying to say. He just pretty much told me, oh, you're screwed. Yep. And he said, what isn't dead yet probably will be pretty soon. And he knew what he was talking about. So we came out of spring, and believe it or not, a little bit survived. And being it was our first shot at winter canola, we thought, well, what the heck, if we're going to really screw it up, like I talked about earlier, let's screw up in style here and let this mess really, if we work hard, we could have a real piece of crap here. So, and we did. And so we got into, it started to green up, and we put down some fertilizer with our sprayer and stream bars, I think late in the fall, with some Agritane and all that good stuff. And we were getting ready to, as we watched, wanting to get out there and spray some clethodim and get the grasses under control. And it greened up what was left, put little shoots up here and there, and it bolted and bloomed at about 6 inches. And I started to get a real bad feeling about then, and I think I called Curtis, and Curtis confirmed everything I'd already been told, that it wasn't good. And so we decided to do the smart thing and let it go. And so well, we got to see what had happened, and we let her go all the way to crop. We didn't spray it, obviously, so goodbye on the grass control and seed bank and all that good stuff. And it did set pods. It set some real nice ones, big fat things like my pinky, about 3 per plant. And so I think all told, it went in that 100-pound an acre range. That was what I could keep in the header. So, yeah. So, yeah.
I gotta ask, what percentage of the field, what percentage of stand were you done with? What percentage
Well, as I counted it up, somewhere around like 15, maybe. I mean, that probably should have been my first clue to be done with it. But I was.
The Russian thistle's not eat your lunch.
They didn't, believe it or not. That had been spring wheat for about 7 years. And we've been pretty aggressive on the Russian thistle and broadleaves prior to that. So actually, it was mostly a cheat and rat-tail fescue. So, the second one I was real happy about. So, so that started off, and the rest of the year, we cut 10 to 13 bushel wheat up there, and we had winter wheat that was on our canola ground. We were really looking forward to that canola bump because we'd had some spring canola and we had winter wheat on it. We found out that spring canola stayed green way into the winter. I think it was Liberty Link. We sprayed some Roundup and then we sprayed some Paraquat, and then we realized there's no leaf surface, so nothing dies, and it pulled moisture well into the winter. So going into spring, there was not a whole lot of moisture left out there, so that it was a beautiful looking stand of wheat going into about May, and better than any of the other winter wheat in the country. And then it just stopped and turned a lovely shade of white, and it was pretty much all done at that point. So actually, our winter wheat on canola, the previous crop, in my opinion, compared to the other winter wheat that we had, actually hurt it due to the amount of moisture it pulled out. I guess when you get no rain, it's hard to grow something. Anyway, so our spring canola was a little bit of a mystery. I was just talking about it again with Curtis. We grew high class 930, and we seeded several fields of it, and the biggest field never emerged. And to this day, I cannot figure out why, because everything was seeded within literally a couple days of each other. There was no great big temperature events. We never found the dead seedlings. We never found anything. We found empty seed casings. And it's a field that's, of course, it's right by the road. You got to love that. So we had been checking it fairly frequently, and right across the road, we had it actually emerge. And didn't do too well because it was a drought year, and I think we had some Group 2 problems. It had been about 3 years since Group 2s, but in probably less than 10-inch rainfall, you probably can't count on those things going away as fast as the label says that they should. So we did a bioassay and thought we were clear. I think the heck with those. If you've had Group 2s out there, you better have 4 or 5 years if you're in dry country, minimum. So I don't know. The ones that keep you up at night are the ones that you can't figure out, the canola that doesn't come up. We had chunks of the field that did, not enough to warrant, we took the stand out. Since we already had the crap across the canyon in the winter canola, we decided to at least take one field out, and we fallowed it. So that was a disturbing thing. You know, crop insurance called it a freeze. I said sure because I wanted to get paid, but I'm not really entirely sure I buy that. So we also grew oilseed flax, and we put that in March. As early as we could get into the field, we did that, and came up great. It looks like knotweed when it comes up, so don't panic, because I did. I mean, it was like the nicest crop of knotweed you've ever seen. It looks like great big weird things. But then we found out that there's a Saskatchewan flax guide that everyone kind of uses as their Bible, and they say that it's, I guess it is true. In the Dakotas and other places, they don't treat it. There is treat available for flax, both neonic and fungicide, but it's not very common. And that wireworms don't eat flax. And I think they lie, because the stand started to disappear overnight. And you can almost see them just pulling it down into the ground. This field actually is one of our worst fields for wireworms. And so we put it out there because we wanted to see what would happen. I guess purpose of a test, right? And so we put it out there to see what would happen. And we seeded 40 pounds an acre. And I'd say probably half of that easily didn't emerge because we started raking back the dirt, and all the little seedlings like hair just under the surface, and where they come and hit them is they nip the growing point off. And it's not like wheat when a wireworm takes a chunk out. A lot of times the plant, if it has enough nutrients, has enough water, it'll kind of come out of it, put out another tiller and try to keep going. With these broadleaf crops, boy, they nip that off and game over. And so we lost half the stand to that, and then we found that when they got a little bit bigger, we were hoping that those linen fibers would start to develop in the stalk, and they do. And once it gets to a certain size, they won't touch it, but they would come up and sample it occasionally, and we ended up getting some disease in that, and the lack of fungicide on the seed caused us some problems too. So we ended up taking that out, all but 5 acres. The 5 acres we left in actually yielded much better than I thought. I didn't even think, I figured we'd be vacuuming it out of the combine, bulk tank, maybe just out of the inside of the combine. It didn't look like much, about boot top high. But it actually yielded about 700 pounds an acre. I was shocked. I'd actually hoped for that normally before the drought and screw-ups and everything else that occurred. So we're going to try a little more next year, hopefully learn from our mistakes. We'll treat it and see if we can get that stand established and get it to take a little bit. And the only other thing on the wheat side was, it's hard to grow any wheat when it doesn't rain, but what we did grow was surprising. I was expecting when it got up around 100 degrees for a month and everything turned white that we would have no wheat and what little was out there would be terrible. And we ended up hauling a lot of 60-plus pound wheat to the elevator. Now, 13 bushels is not anything I go bragging about at the wheat convention or anything, but when I got talking to some of the neighbors, they were hauling 54-pound wheat. We were hauling 64-pound wheat, 62-pound wheat, 60. I think the lightest was 59. And low protein, really low protein. Fertilizer programs with a lot of the neighbors seemed to sync up darn near identical. We didn't really do anything too wacky and wild or, in fact, in some cases, neighbors had put on, 3/4 of what we'd put on for nitrogen. So, and they were still hauling puny wheat down. And their yields were a lot more like 6 to 8. So I don't know if that, was that stripper header, was it, and low disturbance drill? I don't know. I'd like to think so. I'd like to think we did something right and it was part of the plan. But these things all too often turn out to be something that just about the time you think you have it dialed in, you go ahead and prove yourself an idiot. So anyways, that was kind of our year. It was a fun one. I'd care not to repeat again, and but probably will at some point. So, anyways, I guess where we go from here. So,
Okay, we're going to open it up for questions first of all, and then if anybody wants to add their own 2014 story, the mic is yours. Any questions first of all for any of the panelists?
So the question again was, what was the separation between the seed and fertilizer where it actually came out? Yeah, no, that's a good question. And when we first started direct seeding, we were informed that you're going to have seed at the bottom, everywhere from the bottom of your point is all the way on top of the soil surface, and we weren't happy with that. And so we found some seed brakes that we installed on our drill to help exhaust the air off and just have a gravity drop like our hoe drills we were used to using. And so that accounts for putting the seed at the bottom of the point. And the opener we use is a unique one from Australia, but the short of it is that fertilizer point that comes down and rips down to your lowest point sets the fertilizer. And, and then there's the question of, well, is the fertilizer reaching the bottom of that trench? And, initially I wasn't certain about that, but we seeded in some dry enough conditions that the fertilizer shows up even that far down. And so, yeah, the answer to that is yes. And then, so the seed boot comes down, the fertilizer boot comes down like this leading, and the seed boot kind of comes down at a negative angle and pushes soil back. And so it's really consistent. You dig down, there's your seed, you dig 2 inches down. We even take the tape measure out and check it quite a bit. So it was a good solid 2 inches, and it's actually a little more than a lot of my neighbors have been using for separation. And it pulls really hard, and there's been times we've wondered about that, but we thought, no, let's stick with 2 inches. It's a real good solid separation. And so that's where it actually played out, was at 2 inches of vertical separation. Now, some of our neighbors were using a Conservapac drill, which is a paired row configuration, and they did not see the fatality rates in their stands like we did. Anecdotally, I'm no agronomist. My best guess is that on the way down, that canola seedling, the roots are having to make a turn since it's paired row, and it's putting down roots as it goes. And so I think that there's a chance they're seeing similar issues, but since the canola has to make a bend, I think that there's chances it's putting down roots along the way, and it can recover from it. Whereas in my situation, being directly above it, it's going straight down to it, and those first roots hit it, and it can't sustain the damage. So that again, that's all anecdotal and speculative, but at this point, that's all we have to go from it. And in the meantime, we have found, Tom Poole found a study, I think it's from K-State, that actually has some data on this fact. Well, and that's just it. Yeah, Rick's saying the dry conditions exaggerated, and that's just it. And we find that a lot. The dry conditions and the coarse soils really are a different environment than most are operating in. And we try to take that into account at every turn. The salt wasn't one we're more concerned with fertilizer burn, and hadn't thought about the salting. And we're trying to use UN32, which is a lower salt product, and obviously 1034. We didn't realize how high a salt thiazole was. One thing we've discussed possibly is going to ammonium sulfate instead, and it's a little more costly, more dilute, but we thought, since thiazole's half elemental, maybe we'll just go to a lower rate of ammonium sulfate and be getting the same sulfate for the same price. And that's something but in canola, I think the safest bet, and there's a lot of other reasons to not fertilize at first. Those plants getting so big, really using that nitrogen and maybe wasting, some of it. I was talking with Frank about that, and those are things to study, how much are we wasting, how much is going in the crown, et cetera, but yeah.
Okay, the question was, what did we use to plant the flax with? Okay, so we used our cross lot, so 12 inch. So yeah, it actually does a really good job on small seeded crops. We used to seed our alfalfa. We seeded it with our Concord drill, 12-inch spacing, and they were wet years back then, and it's really good thing that it was, because that's the only thing that brought our stand on. And that we did everything. We had the air turned down. We had all kinds of fancy doodads on there, and it still was just terrible seeding it with that hoe drill. The first canola crop that we got some InVigor canola from Curtis that we put in, that stuff was perfect. And so with the flax, and ever since then, as far as putting the seed where it needed to be, it just does a really, really good job. The bad part is if you screw up and don't have your depth set right, it's all wrong. There's no halfway. So
The question was about the Europeans using growth regulators to suppress winter canola growth during the summer. There hasn't been any work done here with that I know of, and that question was asked earlier. Go ahead, Frank. But the rest of the answer is that the work that I've heard about in Europe they're using fungicides such as Folicure or whatever the active ingredient is, and Caramba, I've never seen it written, has been used in Europe to suppress growth or top growth on canola. Supposedly it doesn't suppress the root growth, but suppresses the top growth. And from what I've been told, and I don't really know for certain, it sounded like it was a 3 or 4x rate as to what you would put on wheat for a fungicide. So it's relatively expensive also.
the question was, no, I'm just kidding. Is there opportunity? I believe there is a lot of opportunity, because as much as I screwed up this year, I think I've got way more things I can screw up next year. So the opportunity is definitely there. So don't take heart, everybody.
How about you, Denver?
I think the takeaway for us, we've taken our hits from it. This year, like we said, the canola yield wasn't good, but it was comparable or better to the wheat, I think. And we just seeded our first winter wheat crop on what we've had winter canola on. And so we don't have the numbers, and, depending on this year, if it's a drought year, we won't have numbers to brag on either. But I will say qualitatively, it seems to have really done things to our soil that we've never seen before. The biological, just in the bugs, the breakdown of the of all the residue there, things of that nature. It's doing things to our farm that I think we've never seen, and if it does that qualitative, the people we've talked to today, listening to the biological nature of the soil, I'm really excited to see what that will show up with, when it comes to yield. But overall, I think it's been great, and it's real pretty. So, there's that.
Yes, I still think opportunity's knocking. In another 80 years, we might make as few mistakes with canola and other oilseeds as we do with wheat now. And we're still making them, obviously, from what you've heard today. But no, really, with some of the markets and some the flax and some of these other things coming on, I'm still not a big proponent of cover crop in the 7 to 10 inch rainfall range. But I think we can still do a lot of good things for our soil if we develop a 3, 4, 5 crop rotation and cycle those through. I think we can get many of the same benefits, just in a different manner of approaching it.
Well, I think, okay, did research have any disasters this year? We planted 6 different variety locations. We harvested 1. And that was okay, but a week before we harvested it, we had a hailstorm go through and probably lost anywhere from 20 to 40% of that. We had our first, same thing as Andy and Curtis in Denver were saying. We were working on Lauren's stripper header project at Ralston, and the number one objective was can we no-till and establish winter canola in chest-high standing stripper header stubble. And we went through, we seeded all that, and we had darn near 90% emergence and establishment. And same thing, boy, we thought we were high heaven, we were going to do very, very well. Compared to our traditional fallow, we had 40-50% establishment. Same time that Curtis caught his death row, we experienced the same thing. Curtis growing canola for 30 years, I thought I'm going to follow Curtis's footsteps. Okay, we got white crowns. It's still alive, so I went to church every night and didn't do any good, just like it didn't do any good that the Packers lost. But anyway, so we planted barley late, and we got about 1,400 pounds of barley. I showed the slide yesterday, counting Curtis's, Largo, and Falstaff. I had Sumner, I had CP 115, we had reduced till fallow, we had regular fallow, we had no-till wheat stubble, we had stripper header wheat stubble, we had stripper header canola stubble, or triticale stubble, and everything was lost 100% in all 5 situations. So it did not matter when we planted, how we planted, stubble, no-till, regular variety or anything. It was gone. And same thing this year. We measured. I like Lauren's comment. We talked to the Rock Lake District annual meeting a week or 2 weeks ago, and Lauren gave the talk about this year's planting of no-till canola into stripper header stubble. And her comment went something like this: we have collected a lot of information with no water and a lot more information on less than no water. And we went back and looked at the precip records, and from May 1st to October 16th, we had 1.4 inches of rain in that chem fallow. We had, and we seeded, if I would have been a grower, I would not have seeded. But being research, I thought, let's go ahead and we'll go ahead and try it. We planted, used the AgPro drill in the reduced tillage fallow where we had stripper or conventional header, about 12 to 14 inch residue laying flat. And we seeded that one day with the AgPro. Came back and seeded the no-till the next day. We did raise seeding depth by 1 inch because the moisture wasn't really any better, but it was higher. So we raised it, and we came back 10 days later, and we probably had a 30%, 30 to 40% emergence and establishment in the stripper header plots. And in the fallow where the residue was just laid down, we had zero. I mean, nothing came up. And that 10-day later, we had planted, we placed the seed 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch into moisture. And at that time in the regular fallow, soil moisture line was 1 inch below our seeding depth. And we put thermometers in the soil, and we had, I believe, 10, 12, 14 inch cooler temperatures in the seed row in the stripper header plots than we did in the traditional fallow. So that was kind of our experience this year. We had 4 locations of the variety trial. We did one up at Wade's at Bridgeport. That was in traditional fallow. That was a bust. We had nothing come up. And then the other 3 no-till, one at Mark Green's place, one at Bo Blatchley's, and one at Ed Townsend. So from Okanagan down to Pomeroy, Sultan, we had fairly decent moisture, and we got some good good stands in there. The one up at Okanagan, we had very iffy moisture. We got a quasi decent stand, and then he's gotten a fair amount of rain, and so we have a very good stand in that. So that's kind of our hit and miss and catastrophe good thing. And we're not going to give up yet. We're pretty much like Andy. We're completely sold on the stripper header in our low rainfall wheat production area. It's looking fantastic. There's enough no-till drills out there that you can get through chest high, triticale, whatever. So that's not an issue anymore. So.
Well, like these 3 gentlemen here and every other canola grower in the southern Great Plains, we couldn't wait for 2014 to get over. It was probably the toughest year that I've ever had, I know, over the last 10 years for growing canola. Started out that would have been fall of 2013, extremely dry conditions for seeding, so we waited for rain, and we waited. We waited some more, and about the last 10 days of September, we got some rain, and so we seeded everything about 2 to 3 weeks later than what we typically seeded. So we had small canola going into the winter. Lo and behold, we had the coldest winter we've had in over a decade. So we had some pretty significant issues with winter kill from northern Kansas all the way down into Texas. And then what did survive the winter, the guys that were able to get in and get their crop up and get enough growth on it, it decided it didn't want to rain from about March to June 1st. And so we had really small plants and virtually no biomass for those plants to start growing from in the spring. So we had very spindly, small canola in a lot of places. During that time, we also had about 3 rounds of late freezes where we got down to 25 degrees or less. And so we had blanks on the raceme that were about 8 to 12 inches long. So we, like Andy had a pod here and a pod here and a pod here and a pod here. So we knew yields weren't going to be that great. But the guys had to cut their canola anyway. And then about June 1st, it decided it wanted to rain. And it rained. And it rained some more. And then it decided it wanted to rain some more. And some guys were lucky enough to get in their fields in swath. And so those swaths were rained on and rained on and rained on. And with the canola being so short, we decided, well, we better at least leave some stubble for that swath to rest on so, it'll dry out and so forth. Well, we found out that we should have actually cut that canola off at the ground because we left growing points. And when it started raining, we had a secondary flower. So we had canola crops that had 2 blooms. Some guys actually considered not harvesting the first swath, but letting the secondary bloom flower and harvest that. Neither situation worked. So the guys that went in and tried to pick up their swaths were actually picking up swaths in blooming canola. It was just an ugly disaster. It shows you that canola can survive quite a dramatic range of weather conditions. It's amazing what it takes sometimes to kill the crop. Sometimes we wish it would just die, but it certainly didn't last year. It really gave guys a lot of frustration, and that did subsequently hurt some of the planted acres, especially in Oklahoma this year. We have a summer conference in Enid that typically draws between 300 and 400 farmers, and we had about 100 show up last year because guys were just depressed because their wheat wasn't any better. They cut a lot of 5 to 15 bushel wheat, and canola was about 10 probably. So, and typical wheat's 30 to 40 bushel yield for us. So, going into the fall, we had actually pretty decent moisture to seed into, but guys were a bit scared to pull the trigger, and so we didn't get the acres, but what was seeded did come up pretty well. But 2014 wouldn't go away, and we had 60-degree temperatures throughout September and October, and didn't really have a killing freeze until about mid-November. And then about 20th or so in November, the bottom drops out and we go down to 10, 12 degrees, and we probably lost some canola because of that. We just didn't have an acclimation period for a lot of that canola. When you go from 60 to 10 in a matter of 48 hours, that's a bad deal. That's a bad situation. So we're in a new year, new optimism. We'll see how the crop pulls through. But yeah, 2014 was a year that we all want to forget and not mention it again. So this is the last time we're going to talk about it. So.